The Carolina Panthers finished the 2022 season with a 7-10 record and missed the playoffs for the fifth straight year. They fired former head coach Matt Rule midway through the season, and despite this team starting out with a 2-7 record through 9 games, they won 5 of their final 8 games and finished the year on, well, as strong of a note as they could have, considering the situation. The Panthers' 2023 offseason was, of course, highlighted by trading up from the number 9 overall pick to the number 1 overall pick, and even sending former star receiver DJ Moore to the Chicago Bears so they could draft Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. And because the Panthers traded up to the number 1 overall pick, people kind of assume this is a team that will miss the playoffs and that they are still at least a year away from making any sort of noise. And while I don't expect them or anyone else in the NFC South for that matter to go to the Super Bowl this year, what I want to emphasize is do not sleep on these NFC South teams, because they can make some noise this year. And the Carolina Panthers, even despite having a rookie quarterback, are going to be a team to watch. They're not going to be an easy team to beat and a pushover. But how exactly will they do this year? Well, let's find out. And we are starting today's video by discussing why the Panthers' future is considerably bright, and it's more than just saying they drafted a former Heisman-winning quarterback number 1 overall and leaving it at that. And because Carolina hasn't made the playoffs since 2017, a lot of the moves they make go under the radar and generally do not get discussed a whole heck of a lot by the national media. But outside of DJ Moore last year, their leading receivers were Terrace Marshall Jr., Shi Smith, Christian McCaffrey, who played just 6 games for them, and Laviska Shenault. And excluding CMC from this because this comment obviously doesn't apply to him, but that's an awful receiving core, as Terrace finished second on the team in receiving yards with 490. And in the offseason, they added veterans Adam Thielen and DJ Chark in free agency, and Jonathan Mingo in the draft. And while that's not an elite trio by any stretch of the imagination, it's an improvement from what they had, and I particularly liked the Thielen and Chark signings because of what they represent, and even Hayden Hurst, to which we will get to in a minute. Thielen represents a good veteran target that a young quarterback like Bryce Young will love, because Adam has been around for a decade now and knows the tricks of the trade and how to sit down in zone coverage and how to win in a lot of ways that young receivers do not. And Adam has even said in interviews that Bryce's IQ for the game is a lot higher than he thought any rookies would be, coming straight out of college, and he plays like a multiple year veteran. And I liked the DJ Chark signing because when you think about building a receiver room, the Panthers have a possession guy in Thielen and a deep threat in Chark, and a guy who can and will stretch the defense. Jonathan Mingo is a 6'2", 220-pound rookie who can learn things from each guy while developing himself, and the big thing to remember here is while Bryce isn't throwing to the Bengals trio, for example, I don't think he's completely hung out to dry and that he's going to fail because he doesn't have anybody to throw to. And I think that narrative that's been pushed is a little extreme, and not only is it exaggerated, but what is never brought up when this is being discussed is Bryce is an excellent mover within the pocket. Bryce will move around the pocket or even run horizontally with the field while keeping his eyes downfield, and whether your receiver is a top 2 or 3 guy in the league or any of the guys Bryce will be throwing to this year, having that extra time that Bryce will buy will help everyone. And that's a big reason why I'm not buying the weapons quote unquote are not there for him. Could they be better? Sure, but it's nowhere near the concern people think it is. Hayden Hurst has averaged 8.5 and 8 yards per reception over the last 2 years, and I don't expect that to change. Tight ends are a quarterback's best friend, and especially young quarterbacks, because they are huge targets, usually right in the middle of the field, and having Hurst just sit down between zone coverage is something Bryce will thrive with, as accuracy is one of the biggest strengths in his game. And one thing I am particularly excited about this year with Carolina, and one thing that will only help Bryce's development as a player, is they should be top 12 in rushing this year, as believe it or not, Carolina finished top 10 in rushing yards last year. And by the way, top 12 for Carolina was speaking pretty conservatively, and while I don't think Miles Sanders is an elite back, here's the bottom line. He is an upgrade to what they had in the final 10 games last year, and Carolina did not struggle to run the ball. And that's exciting, especially when you have a rookie quarterback that will need as much help as possible. And that's for every rookie quarterback, not just Bryce Young, as the transition to the NFL level is insanely difficult for any position, let alone quarterback. And running behind this line with Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard is quietly going to be one of the more productive backfields in the league. This almost sounds made up, but for the Panthers in 2022, Chuba Hubbard actually averaged more yards per carry than Christian McCaffrey did while playing for them, as he averaged 4.9 yards per carry to McCaffrey's 4.6. And while I am excited about the Panthers offense this year and am excited to see Bryce Young progress, what I want remembered is this is going to be a work in progress. There's going to be growing pains at times, and as long as Bryce doesn't throw them out of games, and as long as Carolina does not lose the turnover margin by 3 or 4 in a single game, well, their defense will keep them in nearly every single ball game. And this is another reason I am very excited about the 2023 Panthers, and moving forward for that matter too. The Panthers' new defensive coordinator is Ejiro Evero, and if you are not aware of who Evero is, well, he's coming over from the Broncos, and despite how bad the Broncos were last year, their defense was phenomenal, and had they scored just 20 points per game offensively through the first 10 games last year, they would have been 8-2. And oh yeah, Ejiro also aided in the development of a pretty good corner by the name of Pat Surtain. And who do the Panthers want to see take the next step this year, and who could do the same exact thing Surtain did last year? Oh yeah, the guy that was drafted a singular spot ahead of him by the name of J.C. Horn. And one player that will be a constant for Carolina this year and is one of the more underrated players in not just the NFC South, but in all of football, is pass rusher Brian Burns. Burns had a career-high 68 pressures, which is a solid year and close to a nice year, but a very solid year as he had a career-high 12.5 sacks. And what I thought was key for the Panthers in the trade with the Bears was they didn't give up any defensive pieces, because I truly think this is one of the more underrated units in all of football. And after giving up 37 points to the Falcons and 42 points to the Bengals in back-to-back weeks, the defense buckled down for the rest of the year as they allowed 30 points just one time from then on, which was to the Bucs in week 17. And in the final 8 games of the year, Carolina allowed just 18.25 points per game and even held opponents to 15 points or less in 4 of those games. And this was within the 5-3 stretch to end the year that we mentioned at the beginning of the video. I don't expect that 18.25 points per game to hold up through all 17 games this year, as that would have ranked 3rd in the NFL in 2022, but that half-season stretch is why I think the Panthers can make noise this year, and why I think they can be better than a lot of people think. They had a lot of things going against them in 2022, and I remember during the first month of the weekly recap starting in week 2 after the Giants' loss, I was saying to fire Matt Rule, and when you have a head coach get fired midway through the year, it's inevitably going to shake a lot of things up. And given they had a combination of Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and PJ Walker start for them throughout the year last year, it should not come as a surprise that this team finished 29th in passing attempts, 29th in passing yards, and 28th in passing touchdowns. And collectively, these guys completed just 58.4% of their passes, while throwing for just 3,200 yards and 16 touchdowns over the course of a 17-game season. Now, I understand the receivers they were throwing to outside of DJ and once CMC left weren't great, but do we really think Bryce Young can't throw for at least this in his rookie year, assuming he plays all 17 games? I'd be pretty concerned if he doesn't, especially under the guidance of new head coach Frank Reich. And from a pass protection standpoint, I don't think it should be a surprise that rookie Ike Mekwonu allowed the most pressures out of any Panthers lineman last year with 27, and most sacks too with 6, but I did a breakout player video earlier in the summer and included Ike, and I think he's going to take a big step this year. And by the way, 2 of the 6 sacks he allowed last year were to Myles Garrett in his NFL debut. This offensive line is going to be good, and they return all 5 starters, and having that continuity along the line line is huge. And the tone of the Panthers season is going to be set right out of the gate, as they have back-to-back division games against Atlanta and New Orleans, then 3 straight conference games that are in Seattle, home against Minnesota, and in Detroit. And for any team, not just the Panthers, weeks 3 through 5 and even 6 for that matter, as they play in Miami in week 6, is going to be extremely difficult. And if this team starts out 2-4 this year, or even worse, I wouldn't be surprised because they are a rebuilding team. But, and this is key here for the 2023 Panthers, out of those final 8 games they had in 2022, only 1 was by 2 scores, and I very much expect that to continue this year. And that double-digit loss was to the Ravens in a game where they lost 13-3. So admittedly, with that schedule the Panthers have to start the year, I do think they will have a losing record through 6 games. But when they come off the bye in week 8, there's no reason this team can't string together some wins and put together an 8 or 9 win year this year, which for a rebuilding team with the number 1 overall pick in his rookie year would be huge. And to go back to the defense for a minute, this is a unit I am stoked to watch as they have playmakers everywhere. And we discussed Brian Burns earlier, but a player who's going to be key for the team this year is veteran Justin Houston. I know some people may think this is in 2013, and we are in fact in 2023, but Justin Houston quietly had 9.5 sacks last year at 33 years old, and whether it's him, Marquise Haynes, or Yetur Gross-Matos, who admittedly has disappointed since being a second-round pick back in 2020, but the point is, all of these guys have favorable situations this year, not only because of having Burns on the other side, but because of Derrick Brown in the middle too. I know it's easy for Panthers fans to be disappointed with the Derrick Brown pick from a few years ago, as you can say, well, we could have had CeeDee Lamb and DJ Moore for the past few years, or even Justin Jefferson for that matter, but I truly think the best football for Derrick Brown is still ahead. He had 67 total tackles last year and 12 quarterback hits, and a career-high 40 pressures. And it takes interior defensive linemen some time to develop, and I think Brown is a classic case of this. I don't think he'll be a double-digit sack player this year, or maybe ever, because that's very rare for interior defensive linemen, but I do think he could have 50 pressures for the first time in his career this year, and it's a ginormous difference anytime an interior defensive lineman creates pressure, because it is right in the quarterback's face, meaning there's nowhere to go, whereas with an edge like Brian Burns, they can at least try and step up into the pocket to try and evade the pressure from the outside. All of this to say, the Panthers' pass rush is going to get after the quarterback this year and force quarterbacks to throw under pressure a lot, which in turn will create a lot of interception opportunities for the secondary. And Carolina only forcing 17 turnovers last year is something that will change this year. The Panthers are not going to be a flashy team, but they're going to be a hard team to beat every single week. And I think they have a very high floor, and based on the national media and the narrative around them, I think they will surprise some people this year. The team MVP, breakout player, ceiling, and floor are on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as only about 24% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a massive difference. Please check out Underdog Fantasy with the link in the description, as you get a free $100 deposit match, and week 1 lines plus season-long props are out, so if you want to place some coin on Bryce Young either way, for week 1 or the season-long prop, well, now you can. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the Panthers preview, and until the next team preview, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.